I'd like to welcome, I see Mr. Erich is already on the line with us. Awesome to have you with us, sir. Please do allow me a moment just to introduce you to our guests in the house already. So Mr. Erich Schlenker will be doing a session with us, which is What's Holding You Back? Let's get going. A brief introduction. Erich is an experienced entrepreneur, engaging speaker, and entrepreneurial coach of excellence. He is the managing director of the Center for Entrepreneurship at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, USA, where he brings leadership, direction, and inspiration to students interested in growing their own businesses. Erich brings a range of experience to the position. Most recently, he assisted a startup international mining company in addressing challenges and growth opportunities in Guyana in South America. Prior to moving to the high country in 2008, Erich founded and operated Synaptis, a Raleigh-based software training company. He also brings 11 years experience managing brand and marketing programs for Intel Corporation. So ladies and gentlemen, if we may give Erich a round of applause as he joins us for a session where he says, let's get going.
Yay. Well,
and welcome, Erich. You may take over the session.
Great. Well, thank you. And I appreciate that introduction. As you just heard, my name is Erich Schlenker. So I'm here in Boone, North Carolina, and I run the Center for Entrepreneurship at App State. So that means that I work with primarily students, but also community members and anybody who's interested in starting a business. As it turns out, I'm going to share my screen with you, if that's okay. Oh, I need you to enable screen sharing for me. Is that a thing? There we go. Okay. So over the course of the last 8 years, I have worked with about 1,000 startup groups. Most of those were students, but there were a lot of community members in our Western North Carolina area. We have learned over the course of working with entrepreneurs that there are two separate tracks that people need to go down if you're going to pursue an entrepreneurial venture. The first one has to do with the process and the mechanics of starting a business. And that path is all the things that anybody who's been involved with business would be well aware of. You've got to do some planning and modeling of the business, and you've got to do customer discovery and set pricing models. But the more important phase, I think, is where you talk about the mindset of an entrepreneur and make sure that they are mentally ready to go take on the task of starting their own company. So most of the work that we do in workshops is about helping people to understand the way they need to approach their life, approach their work, approach their venture, so that they are positioning themselves for success. And as you will learn in entrepreneurship and in business, is that a big component of what you do is a mind game. It's having strength of mind to be able to move forward. And so today we're going to talk about one particular thing. We're going to say, what's holding you back? And given the knowledge that we have developed over time and the research that exists on what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur, we know what it takes to take action. And by studying people who take action and studying people who don't take action, you can understand the difference between the way they approach their challenges. And we're going to share a lot of that with you today. And where we're going to start is we're going to say, before we start to take action, let's first figure out, where are we headed? That's an important component of this, because if you don't know exactly where you're headed, then taking action is just keeping busy. And we're not about staying busy. We're about being intentional about the effort that we put in. So the first thing I want to talk about is vision. And we describe vision as a vivid and detailed description of an ideal future state as if everything played out perfectly. So another way to say this is, if you imagine yourself 3 to 5 years in the future, and your friends take you out to dinner, or your community gives you an achievement award, and somebody stands up and says, I want to propose a toast to your success. What do you want that toast to say? What are you hoping that person will recognize in you and will acknowledge about the things that you've accomplished? You have to be very clear about where you're going and where you're heading. So if you think about taking action, you got to identify the fact that your current reality is where you are today. Some things are going well, some things are not going well, you have strengths, you have weaknesses. You're a human being. And because you're a human being, you have a reality that you need to honestly acknowledge of where you're starting. And that's fine. There's no right or wrong about where you're beginning. The trick is then to define the vision, your ideal future state that we just talked about. And the challenge is to figure out, what are the steps required to get from where you currently are to where you want to go? And that sounds overly simplistic, but most people don't tend to take the time to figure this out. So what I want to do is, I want us to take a minute, and we're going to take 2 minutes, and I want you to write down what your vision statement would be. And what does a vision statement typically look like? It's what the world looks like if you succeed. It's that vivid and detailed description of that ideal future state if you succeed. So a vision statement should be aspirational and bold, so it inspires you and inspires the people that you share your vision with. It describes specifically what you hope to achieve. By having that written down, it focuses that long-term planning, which is the basis for taking action. And it should be written in plain language. Some people who write mission statements and vision statements think they have to use lofty language and big vocabulary words, and that it needs to be scholarly, and it does not. It has to mean something to you. This is your personal inspiration, and it's the roadmap for how you want to go begin to take action and move your life in the direction that you want it to go. So let's just take that 2 minutes. I would like everyone to either take out a piece of paper or open up a new window on your laptop and answer that question. Where are you headed? What is a vivid and detailed description of an ideal future state for you? And by doing that in this first couple of minutes, it'll give you some context to process the rest of the information that we talk about. So I'm gonna set my timer here for 2 minutes. If you will go ahead and write down your personal vision statement, and this does not have to be the final version of this. If you've not written a personal vision statement before, then this is gonna feel clunky. You're gonna jot some things down and it's not gonna feel polished, and that's okay. The trick is to get started, because the power of writing it down makes all the difference. Because it'll align your mind to make 1,000 micro decisions a day, so that if you've got that vision clearly in mind, your subconscious mind will start to move you in that direction, and you will eliminate all of the side distractions, because you will be clear about the direction that you're going. And just that simple clarification of your personal vision will make a big difference. So 2 minutes. Let's take that, and if anyone has any questions, you can throw those in the chat while we take this 2 minutes and collect our thoughts. So please go ahead and start.
I've got a question, Eric.
Yes.
Is this like
how you know? Good morning.
Personal vision, or business kind of vision?
It can be either one. All right? There could be entrepreneurs that are getting ready to get started. There could be people who currently work in a role. There could be people who haven't figured it out yet, what their life purpose is. So it's a vision for you and what either you want your business or yourself to have achieved in 3 to 5 years. So it doesn't matter which one you pick, as long as it's meaningful.
Got it.
Okay, that's 1 minute down. Take another minute. Okay, so I realize that we don't have a lot of time together today, and to use up 2 quiet minutes on a vision statement feels a little bit maybe unusual for a webinar, but I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to clarify your thinking when it comes to the direction that you are heading in your personal or your professional life. By writing this down, it's a powerful motivator for you. It allows you to be intentional about the next steps. And we're going to talk about taking action and all of what that means. And it will be helpful for you to have in your mind what your own personal vision is going to look like. So, given the fact that you have a vision statement, even if it's in a simple form and it's not yet final, we can now begin that process of figuring out, if I am where I am now, and I've got this idea of where I would like to go in the future, then when we're done with this fantastic weekend of really powerful, inspiring information that you're hearing from all sorts of good speakers, you've got to start to do something. And the first step will be overcoming inertia. And if we're familiar with Newton's third law, it says that if you're in motion, you tend to want to stay in motion. If you're not in motion, you tend to want to stay not in motion. And you've got to overcome that force that is trying to keep you from moving forward. And how do you do that? Well, it's important to recognize what you're not doing, right? So does it mean talking about your vision? No, it does not mean that. Does it mean thinking about your vision? No, it does not mean that. Does it mean hoping that something happens that is going to move you forward? No, it doesn't mean that either. Overcoming inertia means doing something. So what does that mean? If you imagine the forces that are exerting themselves on you as a human being, you're going to have external forces. This is extrinsic motivation. And what are the kinds of forces that are working on you from the outside? It's typical things: your family, your friends, your customers, your mentors, examples or role models of people who are successful that you look up to. These are called extrinsic motivation because they are people who are trying to get you to do something. And what you'll learn if you study human nature, and you'll know this sort of instinctively, is that when somebody tells you, I need you to do this, it needs to be on my desk by Wednesday, or you have a homework assignment, that homework assignment is due Tuesday by 5 p.m., we tend to check the box and we do the things that we feel obligated to and we feel responsible for, but we do them because somebody else is telling us that they are important. And a lot of times the things that we take on are things that are important to other people. They are accomplishing somebody else's vision. And even if we share our vision with our family and our friends and our mentors, and they are encouraging us to do the things that they know are in our best interest, what this represents is accountability. And accountability is absolutely important. There's no question that having those external forces can influence us in moving forward. But if you study entrepreneurship and you study the difference between somebody who has been successful in business, you'll learn that external motivation is actually not as effective as what we're going to talk about in a second. Because if you are an entrepreneur and the weight of your venture is on your shoulders, then all of that internal motivation has to come from you. There's nobody, if you are an entrepreneur and starting a company, nobody is going to be saying, hey, you need to go start this company. The world needs your product or service. You better hurry up and do it. That has to come from you. So we're going to talk about how that happens. Well, if you think about where internal forces get generated, first of all, it comes from having a vision. It comes from knowing where you're going and having a clear statement that says, this is what I am trying to accomplish with my life. This is the impact that I'm trying to have by starting this company. And that vision has to have meaning for you. But that's not the only thing. The last thing, I'm going to show you a model that is going to fill out the last item on that list. If you imagine the way you're in your current reality, in order to move forward, you have two choices. You can take on new challenges, which is the vertical axis, or you can grow your skills. And if you do that, you will be improving your performance and your capacity and your capabilities. Well, but what happens if you do this out of balance, right? If you grow your skill, but you don't take on very much challenge, that's called boredom. That's not where you want to operate. That's unfulfilling. By the same token, if you don't grow your skills and you take on a bunch of challenge that you're ill-equipped for, then that's called anxiety, right? We don't want that either. So you've got to figure out, given where you stand, how you can grow your skills and take on new challenges and do that on your own. You don't want that extrinsic motivation of them telling you that you need to do certain things. You have some obligations and you have deadlines and you have things that you need to do because you're fulfilling somebody else's vision. For you to fulfill your own vision, you've got to be motivated to grow your skills and take on new challenges by yourself, for yourself. And so the answer to what drives you up and to the right on this curve, what drives that optimum performance so that you can improve over time, is one simple thing. It's compelling goals. It's your compelling goals that you do for you, not because somebody assigned them to you, but because they're important to you. And those compelling goals create something called intrinsic motivation. And what you will discover, talk to any successful person, any entrepreneur, that intrinsic motivation that comes from you and your personal passion and desire to achieve the mission and the vision for what you want to do with your life, that's the magic. That's where it comes from. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And what I want you to be thinking about is what compelling goals do I need to achieve in order to accomplish my vision? So in this chart, right, the thing that was missing, your compelling goals. That's what has to happen. So how does that start? Well, you'll notice that a lot of the things we're talking about don't necessarily have to do with action yet. Because running out and starting to take action until you're prepared so that you're taking action that's meaningful, you've got to do some of this planning work. Part of the planning is in this, when you answer the first question in planning, it's where am I going, right? We covered that. It's the why. It's what leadership provides to an organization is the vision. It answers that question of why am I doing this in the first place? So if you are working for yourself, then, and if you have people that are on your team or working for you, that's what they need from your leaders. They need leadership that answers the question, why are we doing this? Where are we heading? But that's not enough. So you also need the how. How are we going to accomplish this vision? And your management team, maybe that's also you, but maybe it's not. The management team says, okay, leadership has set a vision for either our operation or our product or our service or for whatever strategic vision that you have set for your organization or for yourself. The management of that vision is setting the goals. And even setting the goals is not enough, because then there is the specifics of what am I going to go do now? And goals tend to be lofty, right? And they should be. Goals are, if you work from the top down in this pyramid, you set your vision statement. And then you say, the goals are all of the things that have to happen in order to achieve that vision. And if you take the vision away and you just look at all the goals and you say, if I do each one of these goals, have I achieved that vision? If the answer is no, it's incomplete, then you've got to set new goals. You've got to have a sufficient list of goals that will work to achieve the vision. But then the important next step is to have those goals and say, what specifically am I going to go do that's going to achieve those goals? And people skip this step. But this step is important to link the vision statement with taking action. And we'll talk about why. It's because if you're doing this correctly, you set SMART objectives. And so what is a SMART objective? A SMART objective is saying, I know what I need to go do, and I need to figure out how to define that next step I'm about to take with 5 really compelling components. And the acronym is SMART. So it's specific. I need to know precisely what I'm going to go do. It also has to be measurable so that you know when it's done. When have I accomplished this? How do I know it's done? How do I know I was successful? The third thing is attainable, because you cannot give somebody a goal that is so big or an objective that is so large that they know they're not going to accomplish it. And so they're not going to be motivated to move forward. So if I say, I'm going to start a new company, I want 1 million followers on Instagram by 3 months, right? That goal is so lofty that if you assign that to somebody, they're likely not even to start, because they're going to say, I have no chance of succeeding at that. So it has to be attainable. It also has to be relevant to the mission. So, or to the vision. So the person has to see that if you've assigned me an objective and I know what I need to go do, and that's also true for yourself, it has to apply in an obvious way to the success of achieving the vision. And then there has to be a time element to it. You have to have a deadline. So if you set a set of SMART objectives that accomplish your goals, then those SMART objectives are the things that you need to work on. So what does that look like? I used some examples here, right? Because a lot of people will get confused about the difference between a goal and an objective. But a goal is an overall necessary requirement to achieve your vision. It's general. It gives you some direction on which way to follow. It's broad. It tends to be longer term. So an example of that is I need to increase traffic to my website. If you assign somebody the goal, go increase traffic to the website, they're likely not to know how to start. And that's because you're not fully down in that pyramid. You've got the why, you've got your vision, you've got your how, increase traffic, but nobody knows yet what to do. And strategic planning processes will help you to work with your organization or with your team to answer the questions of what goals do we need, and then what objectives are required in order to achieve those goals. So if I say increase traffic to the website, well, then the next step is going to be, okay, what specifically are we going to do? And a SMART objective are the precise actions and steps required to reach the goal. They are highly specific, they have a narrow focus and scope, and they're shorter term. It's specifically what do I need to do next? So if you then take an example of what would a SMART objective look like for increasing traffic, it would be bi-weekly. This is one example, right? You might have 10 SMART objectives for the goal of increased traffic, but an example of one of those 10 would be bi-weekly social media posts with engaging content, corresponding landing pages with analytics and monthly performance report. We're going to target 75 visits per week, and we're going to assign an owner to that. That owner might be you. Owner might be somebody that's a freelancer. It might be somebody that's on your team. But somebody has to feel responsible for getting that done. And your job as the leader, as the person who set the vision, is to hold them accountable to that. As they look at their list, or if you look at your list of things that need to happen, then you're super clear about what is my role in achieving the vision. By doing this in the order that we've done it, it's completely obvious where I fit. And it's important to human beings in general for them to know where they fit and how their work is contributing to the success of the operation. So let's talk a little bit about that. First, this quote is a book that I recently read. I think it's fantastic to highlight the importance of having the SMART objectives. It's that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And another line from that book is that successful people and non-successful people have the same goals. So the difference is your ability to take what you know has to happen to achieve those goals and write it down and assign deadlines and assign ownerships and be specific about what has to happen and make sure that you can measure the success. Because if you can't measure it, if you say increase customer satisfaction, how do you know you've done that? How does anybody know you've done that? If you assign me the job of increasing customer satisfaction, then I'm going to talk to one customer and I'm going to say, are you happy? And if they say yes, I'm going to say, job done. But that's not sufficient. So you can have a goal of increasing customer satisfaction, but you've got to have a series of objectives that say, how specifically are we going to know if our customers are satisfied? And what specifically are we going to do to make sure of it? So if you go then to talk about, as you decide to set your goals and your SMART objectives, if you are working for yourself, then you need to understand this for yourself. But more importantly, if you have people that work for you, or if you have members of your team, if you're not the boss, that's fine, but you probably are members of a team, and maybe you can provide this feedback to the organization in which you work. But there are 4 things that people need in order to stay engaged. This is human nature. The first thing they need is autonomy. Nobody likes to be told what to do and how to do it. So I shouldn't say nobody. I'm sure some people like that. A lot of people do not like that. And the people who have the most to contribute, the people who have the most success and have skills and talents and expertise that you want in your organization, those people with a lot of skills and knowledge and expertise do not like to be told what to do, typically. So in order for you to provide them with autonomy, then you've got to be able to show them the vision. Here's where we're going. This is our goal. Your job is to help us achieve that goal and do it however you need to do it, using whatever talents and skills you have. The instinct of human beings to say, I set the goal, therefore I know best how to accomplish that goal, is risky. It's flawed thinking typically, because the whole point of hiring people is getting that diverse, creative, problem-solving collaboration. And the only way to take advantage of that diverse problem-solving collaboration is to give people the idea to approach, or the opportunity to approach problems and introduce solutions and try things that are different than what you can think of. If you are simply looking for an organization to do exactly what you say, then by all means automate your company and build robots. But we don't live in a world, at least I hope we never live in a world, where one entrepreneur has a set of goals and builds robots to accomplish those goals. We have human beings at the table who need to be empowered to work with you. So you need it and your team need it. They need autonomy. Tell them what the goal is. Tell them you're going to keep track. Tell them you're going to measure it, but give them the opportunity to apply their own creative thinking to achieve the vision that you have for your company. I use this example all the time, that if you have a company, and that company is making screwdrivers, for instance, and somebody's on the line and they make 50 screwdrivers an hour, and you say, I want to increase productivity for my company. How do I increase productivity of my company? You can do all sorts of performance management and incentives and try to say, I'll pay you more money. All of that stuff is all extrinsic motivation that we talked about in the beginning. And a lot of people do that first because they think that works. It does not work. The very best way to get somebody to make more screwdrivers is to walk up to them and say, great job, you made 50 screwdrivers an hour. If you say that to somebody, they're likely to hear that, feel really good about their current performance, and they're going to say, you ain't seen nothing yet. You think 50 is a lot. Watch what I can do. You give them the autonomy to figure out for themselves how to do better. And you tap into what makes them a human being. And it's these four things that keep people engaged. So the second thing on our list is mastery. You and the people who work for you want to feel like they're good at something. They want to feel like they are experts. And so part of giving them the autonomy and allowing them to try new things and apply their talents and solve problems worth solving is to give them the tools they need to build mastery over time. So you need that, and your people need that. Build that into the process. So when you set a SMART objective and you assign it to somebody, give them the sense, even if it is just by reframing the assignment, that by doing this, you are building skills for yourself. People want that. It's the reason that they show up for work every day, is they're trying to improve their own personal development. The third thing is purpose. And this gets to the R in SMART objectives. It's the relevance. Having purpose means that I show up for work today for some reason. You should know that reason for yourself. That's going to come from your vision, which is why it's so important to start with that. But the purpose for your team also has to be understood. You show up because you're trying to accomplish something. You're doing it for some reason. So as you are working with a team or yourself, tap into, why am I here? What is my greater objective, my vision for myself, for my company, for my customers, for whatever drives you? But connect your strategic planning, your goal setting, and your objectives to the purpose that brings you to work every day. And then the fourth thing is inclusion. People want to feel like they're part of a team. So if you are sitting in your lofty tower and you assign everybody all these SMART objectives and you post them on the wall and you have accountability and you're cracking the whip, right? People are not going to feel like that's part, like they're part of this team where they're tapping into their purpose and they're developing mastery over time, and they're being given the freedom to do what they need to do in order to accomplish the vision and bring to bear all their own talents and passions. Inclusion means you build teamwork. You get people to feel like they belong there. And that's super important for getting people to be motivated and to participate in your goal setting process. So keep yourself engaged by recognizing that these are motivating factors for you, and keep your team engaged by making sure that you recognize that these 4 things are important to keep them moving forward. I want to pause here for a second and see if anybody has any questions, because I can just go through this this presentation and we can get this over quickly, but I don't want to do that. I would like to I'd like to get some conversation going. Does anybody have any questions or
We have a comment, Eric, from Uno, when you were making the point around autonomy. I love the point about autonomy. It motivates people. You're welcome to actually turn on your camera and mic and ask any questions to Eric, or type in the chat, whichever you prefer. So I see another one from Zigisa, not at this point, Eric, but we're following.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Is Eric still around, or is something with his connectivity?
Yeah, it looks like we've just lost him. Let's just check.
Okay. As he is coming back, I just wanted to emphasize to everybody that to learn as much as you can from this guy, you definitely have to have a note, and you can ask as many questions as you can so that he answers them, because he is super practical at what he does, and he coaches entrepreneurs all the time. I've received so much coaching from this guy in places where things were getting tough for me. So please, if you are in a hospital and you want the doctor to help you, please don't stop saying, this is where my pain is, because you've got the doctor in the house.
I see he's joining back in.
Yeah, he's logging in.
Hello, I'm so sorry. Zoom just dropped me right off the call, so I apologize for that. So anyway, I'm back. What I was hoping that I could get is some feedback. If somebody has any thoughts at this stage and comments or questions about where we are so far before we move to the next topic.
I see Uno's hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, maybe if you can put back that last slide,
Sure.
especially on autonomy, and the last point on building team and building teams. What are some of the points that kind of help us give autonomy? Because at some point, there's a balance between autonomy and wanting to get things done. And especially as a starting entrepreneur, there are things that you may want to hold back to yourself, not communicate, or sometimes because your team is not necessarily a team of employees, but different businesses that are together. How do you bring them together and start working as a team towards that goal? And how do you give them that autonomy and motivation to work towards the goals that you have in your company as well?
Yeah, Uno, that's a good question. And if you can enable my screen sharing, then I can share the screen again. I got kicked off hard for Zoom. I don't know. I guess. Okay, here we go.
you know? Mm-hmm.
I think there's a thing about people in the US, they keep getting kicked out.
Yeah. So that's a good question, and with any of these kinds of things, there is sort of a spectrum that you need to stay on, right? You can't obviously give somebody autonomy if they lack the skills to do the job, because some people will need training and they will need other sorts of support. So you have to be a little bit, you have to follow your intuition for what you think people are ready for. But when you hire people at entry positions, you've got to make sure that they are given opportunities for growth, and that when you hire them, you're bringing on people, and in your hiring process, you should not be necessarily recruiting simply for somebody with the specific skill to do that particular job description and then expect to sit them in a room and have them execute that job description all day long. You want them to bring their innovation and their creativity to the table. And so you got to write these job descriptions so that people have a chance to flex their creativity a little bit in the role. And by doing that, it'll force you to break the pattern that how things have to happen. Because the bigger risk is that somebody who is going to either hire another company or a freelance or a contractor to come in and help. You're not going to hire them as an employee, but you're going to hire the resource. Mm-hmm. If you hire a resource and say, do this exact way, you're eliminating them bringing to bear all of the experience that they have had building their capabilities to that point. And you want to unlock all of that. You want to have all that creativity applied to your problem solving. So you have to be thoughtful about it. And you have to be intentional about it. You don't want to be reckless about it, but you have to recognize that people are driven by these four things, whether they have a lot of skill or they have a little skill, whether they work for you or they don't work directly for you. Maybe you're hiring them. It doesn't matter. Human beings need this. So to the extent that you can build these capabilities in to whatever assignment you give to somebody who you are bringing to your team to get work done, it's important to recognize that. Some people will be worthy of more autonomy than others, but even the people who are getting started, and when I ran my company, I hired plenty of entry-level people. But what you have to say to this entry-level person is, I need to understand, what are your passions? What do you consider your talents? What experience do you bring to the table? What skills do you have that I might not know about? How do we take all of what makes you, you? How do we take all of that and give you the opportunity to apply that in your own way to meet this goal? People who are entry level and are motivated and are good hires, which it's your job as an employer to make good hiring decisions, those people will flourish in your organization, and you won't have the turnover that a lot of people have. It's super common that if you've got a company, you hire somebody entry level, you train them, you get them to do their job, and they get better at something, and they say, now that I'm better at this, I can go get somebody to pay me more money, and they leave. So you end up spending a whole lot of money to build people's skills, and you don't reap the benefits of that because they run off and they take those skills to the marketplace. It's human nature. They are much less likely to do that if you are training them and giving them skills and also providing these four things. Then they have seen that they are investing in you and that they feel like their work is an investment of themselves in your company. Your retention will go up, your turnover will go down, and people will bring more of their own value to the table and give it to you because they will be in an environment where they feel like it's being welcomed and invited. Does that answer your question?
Eric, we've got another question from Gugu. Gugu, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Eric. You might have answered my question, but I'll shoot anyway. So my question is with reference to point number 3, purpose. So purpose in most cases is subjective to people's circumstances, right?
Right.
And in the context of a workplace, in a team set up, how do you ensure that this purpose is as much as it is subjective to people's goals, and most of it is usually personal, over and above the team's vision. How do you ensure that this purpose is in alignment, or how would I put it? This purpose is aligned to the team's vision, such that your personal goal, or everyone in the team's personal goals is aligned in such a way that I'm not here to fulfill this goal or this activity because of what I want for myself, but also to build towards this team vision. I don't know if I'm clear there.
Yeah, I think I understand your question. Let me take a crack at it. You can tell me if I have answered your question. I think of this sort of on two separate tracks. So the first one is that a big portion of somebody feeling purpose in their role is that they can connect their specific job with the goals and the vision of the company. So independent of their own personal motivations. If somebody's job is to sit on an assembly line and perform one specific function, and that's the only thing they're exposed to, then they don't really see how their purpose, how their job is contributing to the business. They just know that they have their one little function, and if the communication is not strong, and if they're not connected in with the overall goals and objectives of the company, then they show up that they perform their task and they go home. A good organization will let people know that that one simple task that they're doing is an important component of the bigger picture. And so making people aware of that bigger picture and knowing what their role is in accomplishing that bigger picture, and including them in the updates of how things are going for the company, and including them in the celebrations for the company's success because of the one function that they are performing, that provides them purpose. So part of it, and the biggest part for somebody, if you're looking at building an organization and bringing employees on board, it's that communication, it's that trust and communication that they understand how they fit into the overall goals of the organization. And that's just good old-fashioned communication and employee engagement. The second part of the question is, if I show up for work every day, then how do I get my personal goals connected to what's happening at the company? And this is a little more difficult, but it's part of the reason why you shouldn't have 25 people working for you. It's the one reason why you should have a management structure in your organization, so that somebody has 5 to 7 people working for them and not very many more than that. Because when you hire somebody on, you can give them all of the information they need about the long-term strategic goals of the company and let them know where they fit. But the thing that you need to understand as an employer is, why did you take this job? And if you ask the question, you'll find that most people, the first thing they might say is, I took the job because I needed the money, right? Okay, well, that's not a powerful motivator, but it certainly is an answer to that question. And a lot of people do take a job because they need the money, but there should also be some sort of connection that they have to the work that they do, or to the people that they work with, or for what the company stands for. And if that's the case, then discussing that with them and finding out what is it that brings you to work every day. You can figure out how to work with them and say, fine, if money is the primary reason, then let's talk about, how do you perform well here, and how do you engage enough and become a valuable contributor to this company so that you can continue to earn money here, which, if that's your top priority. But if you ask the next level of question, they'll be surprised, because most employers don't care about the next level of question, which is, okay, money's fine, set that aside. Why else do you come to work? What is it that you are getting from the work that we do here that is meaningful to you? And then, to the extent that you can tailor their tasks, tailor their responsibilities, give them exposure to new skills, give them access to clients or customers, allow them to provide ideas when you guys are trying to do brainstorming to figure out new products or services or perform improvements to your systems. If you have that one additional level of conversation with your people to find out, other than money, why are you here and what would you like to get out of this role? Oftentimes, making those minor adjustments to either how you communicate to them or how you define their job description, or what additional responsibilities that you expose them to, that matters. And to the extent you can make them feel included and make them feel valuable, you will win loyal employees who will keep your vision and your mission as a high priority for them when they show up for work every day. Does that answer your question?
Google?
If you're still answering me, I actually had left. I had a connection problem and I just came in towards the last part.
Okay. Well, I know how those
So it's so
connection problems
unfortunate.
work, so I can understand that. So so I'll summarize in a nutshell. There are two ways of approaching it. It's important that you tie your employees to the purpose of the organization so they understand where they fit in the overall goals and strategic objectives of the organization. So communicating with them so they know where they fit, even if they're doing a small, simple task, that small, simple task is still important to the overall operation of the company. Yet they should feel that way. You should communicate it to them in that way. And then the other part is understand what motivates them beyond getting a paycheck and figure out what else they would like to accomplish. What skills are they trying to build? What do they find interesting? Where would they like to apply their creative ideas? And then just provide those opportunities so that they feel part of the process. That will provide them with their personal purpose. It also helps with inclusion. It helps with mastery. It helps them feel engaged in the organization. And that engagement will keep them applying themselves and committed to your operation. There's a story that people tell about the space program here in the US. And there was some consultants were walking around, and I might get the details of the story wrong, but they were walking around the Space Center at Cape Canaveral, and somebody stopped, and there was a janitor there sweeping up the floor. And they said, so, they introduced themselves. So what do you do here? And he said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. He was sweeping the floor, but he understood that by keeping a safe, clean workspace, he was contributing to putting a man on the moon. It's that kind of connection that you want to create with your people. I may be screwing caps on toothpaste tubes, but what I'm doing is I'm helping people preserve their smiles, right? That's the kind of connection that you want to create with your people so they understand where they fit in the bigger picture, and it gives them purpose.
It does. Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So let's talk about, let's continue on here. So now we've sort of gone through the tactics of taking action, meaning that you define your vision so you know the direction you're facing. Without having the vision, like I said, you can take lots of action and you can spin in circles. And you're always moving, but you're not getting anywhere. The vision helps to orient yourself so that you know the direction that you're going. By communicating that vision to your team, to your extended team, to your partners, to your customers, sharing that vision aligns everybody in that direction. So that even if you're moving slowly, at least everybody's moving in the same direction. And by writing the vision down, you now are clear about what you would like to accomplish. And the clarity of writing that down is super powerful for the way your brain makes conscious and subconscious decisions. So then we said, great, now let's then use intrinsic motivation to try to get ourselves moving and break that inertia, and then develop some plans so that we know specifically what to go do. And we just covered that. So now we have to say, so what else prevents people from taking action? And overwhelmingly, what holds people back is some element of fear. And so in order for you to get up off the couch and get started, you need that intrinsic motivation, but you also have to be able to overcome your fears. So give me some types of fears. What do you think people are afraid of?
Failure.
Fear of failure. Number one, I'll even move my slide forward. Fear of failure, absolutely correct. It's the most common one. What else are people afraid of?
We have in the chat success.
I didn't catch that one.
Success.
Oh, fear of success. That's interesting. Yeah, well, that's going to be. We'll talk about that one as sort of a component of one of these other ones. What else?
Environment or community, what they're going to say about what you want to achieve.
Okay. So fear about what other people will think is what that means, right?
There's a comment on the fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. That's also going to be one of my blue boxes. Yes. Fear of uncertainty. What else?
Getting broke.
Yeah. Fear of failure, fear of losing all your money. Exactly right. That's a big one. So if we take now, granted, I don't mean to suggest that I've got the exact answer to everything here, but the four that I think I come across most often are fear of failure, which is absolutely the most driving factor. There's fear of rejection. What are people going to think? If people tell me no, if people hurt my feelings, I don't want that to happen to me. Another one is fear of inadequacy. What if I'm not any good at this? What if it exposes the fact that I took this bold step and people think, who did you think you were trying to do this? Right? You think you're all that because you tried something that was above your capabilities, and that was embarrassing for you. People are worried about that kind of thing. And then the last one, as we talked about, is fear of uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen. What you need to understand is that if you feel any of these things, welcome to the human race. Everybody feels these things. These are natural and built in to who we are as human beings, because it's been in our nature. In order to survive as a human species, we tend to be wanting to survive in small groups. We like to have that community that we can live in, because historically, going back to the first people who walked the earth, in order to build tribes and communities and live in small groups that pooled their resources and pooled their skills and talents in order to beat whatever risks and challenges that they faced, it was important for people to fit in. Biologically, it was important to fit in, because the human being that walked around the woods by themselves got eaten. So we have grown up through thousands, tens of thousands of years, building in these things into the way we approach our life. And only recently have we been in our modern world where these instincts that we feel are maladaptive. They don't help us, they hold us back. So when we think about taking action, we need to understand that fearing failure does not mean that you're not a good entrepreneur. It doesn't mean that you're not cut out for entrepreneurship. If you feel rejection, it doesn't mean that you're weak and you're soft and you're oversensitive because you don't want people to say no to you. Fear of uncertainty doesn't make you a chicken. It doesn't make you worried about moving forward or somehow incapable or unworthy. It doesn't do those things. It means you are human. And so we are not going to suggest in this workshop that you try to figure out how to stop feeling this way, because you will feel this way. The trick is reframing this. So when we started, we talked about entrepreneurship and the importance of the mindset. And there's absolutely a process of mechanics to build a company, but the mindset is the way you look at the world. It's your power of choice. How you choose to respond to what happens to you and how you choose to respond to these fears that you have makes all the difference in your ability to move forward. People who are successful and overcome their fears, they are not fearless. They have the same fears. They just figure out how to overcome it. So how do you do that? Entrepreneurship is a big portion of it is in your head. It's the way you approach problems and challenges that makes all the difference. So what does that mean? You have to reframe these things in your own head. Part of it is playing a trick on yourself. And in the beginning, you might feel just that way. I'm playing a trick on myself. But the way your brain works physically is that when you have reactions over and over again, and those consistent reactions drive your behavior, you're building up channels in your mind. You're building neural pathways that become physically thicker because you've used that pathway enough that it becomes a rut. It becomes something that becomes instinctual. It feels normal and natural because you've done it so many times. It's called myelin. That's the physical substance that builds in these neural pathways. So when you try one of these things, these reframing exercises, it's gonna feel uncomfortable. You might feel like you're playing a trick on yourself. You might feel like you're pretending. In the beginning, that's okay. But by doing it the first time, it'll feel awkward. Doing it the second time, you'll feel more comfortable. You've done it before. If you do this over and over again and you stop yourself every time you have one of these fears well up inside you, you'll become natural at the way of overcoming the fear. And it's critical to reframe these fears in order to be in a position to take action. So how do you reframe your fear of failure? Well, very simply, you say, I'm not going to think about this as failure. I'm going to think about this as experimentation. So, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. If you think about the way you have been raised and the school system that you have been in, you have been wired over the course of the bulk of your adult life and your childhood, that if you get a failing grade on a test, that's bad. If you get enough failing grades, you can't move on and advance to the next grade. Those instincts, those effects have been beat into your mind from a young childhood. Failure is bad. Failure has negative consequences, and you're carrying all of that into your adult life and into your professional life. But it's time to stop that. You have to think of the things that you try as experiments. And by the very nature of an experiment, you know that some experiments are going to work, and you're going to know that some experiments are not going to work. Thomas Edison said it took him 10,000 tries to build a light bulb. And he said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I eliminated 10,000 options that don't work. And he found the one that did. So by experimenting, you are learning. There's no faster way of learning than experimenting, because you can philosophize and theorize and imagine how things might work in the real world, none of that matters until you try something. And as soon as you try something, you will know right away, did this work or did this not? And to the extent you can try really, really early, then you save all of that time you would have spent trying to imagine if it would work, or trying to think, or trying to ask people, or writing some things down, or you gotta try it. And if you try it and it doesn't work, you learned from it and you make adjustments and you move on. Now, Uno brought up a really good point, right? You have to be super careful with your experiments. And when we talk about experimentation in entrepreneurship, we say that you don't want to take experiments by throwing all your eggs in one basket and putting all your chips on the table and betting between success and failure all in one shot. We say that as you move through life and you move in the direction of your vision, you should do low cost, low risk experiments to eliminate the risk or mitigate the risk as best you can. So if you try something in a controlled environment, see if it works. If it doesn't work, okay, I learned it didn't work. Let me try something else. You should continue to push forward, continue to experiment. And when things don't work, you just back up a half step and try something new. That low cost, low risk experimentation eliminates the fear of colossal failure. Sometimes you still fail. That's also part of life. But to the extent you can mitigate your risk and build your confidence and reframe failure as experimentation, you're going to be better off. And again, you're playing a trick on your own mind by changing that internal voice that you hear in your head. Your internal voice is going to say, oh, don't be careful, you might fail. And you have to reframe it and say, I'm not worried about failing, I'm experimenting. And no matter what happens, I will learn something. The next thing that we have is to reframe rejection. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, think about the larger context of your life. You can worry about rejection, but when you're 80 years old and you're reflecting back on your life, you're not going to be thinking, oh, wow, I can't believe I was rejected that one time in 2021 when I tried something new and somebody made fun of me or whatever. You're not. When you get to 80 years old, you're going to look back and the only thing you're going to be bothered by is the things that you didn't try, the regrets that you have from things that you were too afraid to try. So when you're fearing rejection, when you feel that well up inside you, you got to say, nope, when I'm 80 and I look back, I want to make sure I have no regrets. And that motivation to avoid being regretful for the choices you didn't make can empower you to just push a little bit and take any rejection that might come. If you get rejected in what you try, again, that was an element of experimentation. I don't know if you have Kentucky Fried Chicken where you are, but that's an example I use all the time here in the United States, because the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is a fried chicken franchise in the U.S., his name was Colonel Sanders. He was told no 1,008 times as a 65-year-old man, because all he knew how to do was fried chicken. And he wanted other people to pay him for his recipe and build restaurants based on his chicken recipe. 1,008 people said, no, I will not do that. That is a ridiculous thing for me to do, pay you over and over, year after year for your chicken recipe. But on the 1,009th time, somebody said, I'll give that a try. The resilience that is required to keep doing that, to overcoming that rejection again and again and again. The way to overcome that is to say, I never know whether the next one that I ask is going to be the one that works. And you keep doing it and you don't worry about the rejection. So looking back and making sure that you have no rejects and actively reframing that in your head when you feel that fear of rejection is super important. Tell yourself, do yourself the favor of becoming an old person who doesn't have regrets on the choices that they didn't make. Now it comes to inadequacy. Fear of inadequacy is another big thing. What if I'm not good enough? What if by trying this, I prove to the whole world that I'm a fraud, that I didn't have the skills to pull this off? What if that embarrasses me? Welcome to the human race. Doubts and fears are absolutely in the back of everybody's mind. How do you overcome that? You overcome that with authenticity. You have to say to yourself, I may or may not be able to do this. This may be at this point in time beyond my skills. I may be trying something that doesn't work. That's okay, because I am who I am. I have the skills and talents I have. I have the experience at this point in my life that I have. And I'm going to own it. And I'm going to recognize, if you've heard the term growth mindset, a growth mindset says that I can accomplish anything if I put enough time and effort into it. I have to decide what's important enough for me to apply myself to, so that I can grow into the person I want to be. That's the growth mindset. A fixed mindset says, I am who I am, never going to change. I can only do the things that I'm capable of doing right now. And that's the extent of my ability to succeed in life, is what I'm capable of doing right now. That's not the case. Authenticity means that you're approaching the world and saying, I am who I am. I want the whole world to understand that I have goals and dreams, just like you. I have ambitions, just like you. I have fears, just like you. And I'm going to try anyway, because I know who I am. That's rough to do the first time, but just like that myelin that builds up in your mind over time, approaching life with that authenticity does two things. Number one, it takes away that fear of inadequacy. But more importantly, when you are around somebody that feels comfortable with themselves, when you're around somebody that's authentic, and they sit and you know when you talk to them that they are fully aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. They're perfectly comfortable being who they are and trying things and knowing that some things will work and some things won't. And when some things don't work, they have a good laugh about it. They don't take themselves too seriously. Everybody knows people like that. They are a delight to spend time with, because their authenticity gives you permission to be authentic. It lowers the bar of unreasonable expectations. If you are who you are, you will be more comfortable, you'll be more relaxed, you'll be more honest, and that will draw people to you. People will be looking to support you because they will recognize in you the reality of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. So the irony of somebody who fears inadequacy is that constraining yourself because you fear inadequacy is so much more work than just authentically being you, letting your guard down, doing your best, and letting everybody know that that's just okay, and giving them permission to be themselves, and that's just okay. It's a much more relaxed way to move through life. And what's the added benefit of that is that by being relaxed, by not wasting all of that energy trying to be somebody that you're not, you have all that additional energy and creativity to apply to the thing that you're trying to do, and you tend to be more successful anyway. So reframing in your mind inadequacy is super important by just being yourself, and remind yourself and reframe that in your mind. The last thing is the fear of uncertainty. We have this expression that we say, ambiguity tolerance is a superpower if you're an entrepreneur. Ambiguity means that you're going to try something and you're not entirely sure what's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that you're reckless. Doesn't mean that you go out there and just try stuff and I don't need a plan. I'm just gonna embrace uncertainty. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about looking at life as an adventure. If you fear uncertainty, you're worried about what's going to come next. Accept the fact that the world is not designed for you to know exactly what happens next. It's designed to be an adventure. And if you can embrace that and do all your planning and have your vision and try to overcome the fears that hold you back, but recognize the fact that there are uncertainties that you can't control. And we'll talk about control later. But that adventure should be exciting. And again, it might be playing tricks on your own mind, but reframing uncertainty into adventure in your own head is a good exercise. You should practice doing that. So when you're feeling reticent about moving forward, I don't know what's going to happen, you got to say, hey, I don't know what's going to happen. This is exciting. Let's do this and see what happens. In controlled ways with low cost, low risk experiments to test the waters, but continuing to push forward. If you can accomplish this and reframe the way you think of uncertainty, life becomes fun. And there is no exhilaration better than having a company that's functioning, that's high performing, that's successful. It empowers you professionally, it empowers you personally. You get to have impact on the world. You get to accomplish your goals, achieve your vision. There is no exhilaration better than that. If you have a fear of uncertainty, you're holding yourself back from that. You will have regrets. You will spend your time worrying instead of saying, wow, that world that I just described, owning your own destiny, figuring out how to have impact, being proud of the accomplishments that you've achieved, achieving the vision you have personally and professionally for the rest of your life, that's exhilarating. The motivation for looking at life as an adventure is the desire to get to that place. And if you have written your vision statement and you have written down your goals and your SMART objectives, then you know what has to happen. Executing to that and finding that intrinsic motivation and overcoming the fears of trying, it's all about how you approach it. It's all about how you think about why you're having these fears. Where do these fears come from? And is it really worth the energy and the worry and the drag that you're feeling on your own success? Reframe it in your head, and it makes a huge difference. Let's take a pause here and see if there's any questions or comments.
So Eric, we've had a number of comments in the chat as you were going through from the time we went into the different fears.
Okay.
I'll just check in. So Zigisa said they fear meeting the person they truly are. So this is when you were asking the different types of fears. Inferiority complex, inadequacy, that's a good one. I was about to type imposter syndrome. Then Mr. Maruta just commented, wow, failure canceled. So when you start realizing how to rethink or reshift the way you see the different fears, then what if the next try is the one that succeeds? So this is when you were talking about moving the mindset shift, basically, of putting yourself out there. Then believe in yourself, changing from what if I fall to what if I fly. Those are just some of the comments in the chat, but I think we can open up the floor for everyone. You can turn on your mic if there's any insight that you would like to share from what we've received from Eric this far. For myself, Eric, I think this section has just been a mindset shift for me, where a lot of times you don't even want to take any form of action because all these types of fears already start clouding you from taking the next step. But what the way that you've helped us to see it differently, even if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of it all. You actually reminded me of a lady recently watched. She had launched a wine brand. The launch was a complete disaster from everything that had happened on that day. And she's now sitting with a friend of hers, and they were not there. They're asking, so how did things go? And she says, you know what? It was a disaster. I made a mistake. I hired like she owned the journey, but she didn't fall apart. Exactly, Real Housewives of Durban. Someone just made a comment from the show. So, but I just appreciated how if I were in her shoes, and I was watching that thinking, if I was in her shoes, the world would have opened and swallowed me, because for me, it would have been my reputation, how they perceive me, I failed. But she exactly to your point, it was something she said, it didn't work out. Whatever she regrets, she wants to try again and do a relaunch and whatnot, but it wasn't the end for her. And a lot of times for most of us, it tends to be the end, and you never ever come back, because that's the goal, that's the end of it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and so let me ask you a question. Did you think any less of her because she failed?
In fact, she may now see her as I see her differently, because while I was watching the show and it was failing, to be honest, I was like, disaster, 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 world open up, oh my gosh. And then when she responded the way she did, I was actually proud of her, and I look forward to whatever she does even in future.
Right? And that's precisely the point I was making during authenticity, right? She owned it. And she was entirely comfortable with herself and what had happened, and she moved on. And you admire people like that. You want to invest in their success. Their failure gives you the inspiration and courage to try yourself. It's amazing that if you approach a failure like that, and you get all down in the dumps, and you're embarrassed, and you start to get down on yourself, and that's the kind of reaction that gives you the exact wrong result. Own it, step up, be authentic, move on. People will follow you. It's inspiring to see somebody who can pull that off. Be that person. Yeah, exactly. It's just a mindset. It's just right up in here. The other thing I want to say, because a lot of people were sort of talking about believe in yourself, and those are, just, they're different ways of saying the exact same thing, 100% right. And the other thing I want to talk about with these fears is that sometimes, and the imposter syndrome is a classic example of that. People have this odd perception that what they're feeling is unique and different, and makes them different than everybody else. They feel like that these feelings exclude them from the world. In reality, those feelings include you in the world. They make you just like everybody else. And so a lot of times, this sort of authenticity, where you live your real life, your authentic life out in the open, and you're honest about who you are and what you're afraid of, and what you're going to try, and how you feel about your success. Saying that out loud shines a big bright light on what's real. And a lot of those fears come from the perception that what I'm feeling is something that somehow has to be hidden from everybody else, because it's so unusual, or it's so shameful, or somehow it's gonna make people think less of me, the fear of inadequacy, that you tend to keep it in a dark place, and you try to cover it up, and you try to hide it from everybody. That's a lot of additional work. Sometimes shining a big bright light on the thing you're most afraid of, you realize, well, once you shine a light on it, it's not that scary. And when I shine a big bright light on it, a lot of people gather around and say, oh, you've got one of those too, huh? That's comforting. And so a lot of the times these fears are in our own head, and they hold us back because we've got these perceptions and we do the self-talk that somehow makes us feel like we're less than because we have fears. Knowing everybody has them and showing people how you're really feeling is liberating. And as soon as you release all that energy from trying to hide the things that you're afraid of, instead of using that energy to move yourself forward and do low risk, low cost experiments to be able to live an adventurous life, it's life transforming to be able to reframe that in your own mind.
So true. And to your point, Siamo also just made a comment just to elaborate on the example that we used with the lady, that she not only liberated herself by being authentic and truthful, the people seem to have received her honesty as well, because her brand is now successful. It's actually in retail in South Africa, which means it wasn't as much as it was a shameful launch. People didn't stop there. She owned her truth and she was authentic about it, and people have gone out to support her, which justifies her brand being in retail stores. So to that point, sometimes what we fear and we want to hide from the world, if we were just authentic and truthful about it, the next person actually receives you for who you are, and they like, okay, that didn't go well, but let's still, promote, see what you're about. I see Hope got a question.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Eric, for the presentation. Like the presentation actually resonates a lot with what I'm experiencing currently, like in terms of trying to overcome the fears and all that. You find like I've recently gone into farming, I think from last year into this year, and I've been doing more of the horticultural kind of farming, but without really exploring the greenhouses, because that's sort of like my next step if I'm to get enough land. So my first crop, the first time around, I had challenges with the people that were assisting me, because they were sort of like I think they were stealing from me, in a way. And then the second time around. The second time when I did the second crop, we had a challenge of the market being flooded. We had done the research, but unfortunately, the COVID situation also then affected the whole cycle, because you find when most institutions, especially schools, are closed, then the market has nowhere to offload. Because you find some of the products are taken by the boarding schools, some by institutions and so forth, and then that has been the situation. And you find that most people also were now sort of like had turned also to doing their own gardens and so forth. So that was a second challenge. And this third time around, just recently, I've harvested my crop, but I had also again the challenges of when you cannot really move around and you need to be monitoring frequently. A lot of things have been happening in the field. So I was getting to a point where like I was saying to myself, is this really worth continuously investing in? But these are just roadblocks in a way. And at each and every level and each and every stage, I've been sort of like learning the processes, because for me, it's not an area which I'm really strong at, but it's an area which I'm learning. And by sort of like looking at my inadequacies and then trying to own those inadequacies and strengthening those inadequacies in a way, I'm beginning to look at the aspect of authenticity in the way that you have explained it, and it's becoming more of a thing where I'm now seeing what I really need to be doing. So you find I've been for the failure which I've been looking at has been more of the experimentation aspects that have been going on. I don't have any regrets per se, only that you find sometimes you'll be looking at big profits coming through, but then you find they are not yet really there. So I'm grateful for this presentation, because it has opened up those particular doors, and it's now becoming, I hope it becomes more of an adventure where I'm actually learning and at the same time becoming profitable.
Well, good. Kudos and congratulations. It sounds like you've got the right mindset, and you're trying new things, and some things are working and some things are not. You're learning as you go. You're not giving up. That's exactly the way the system is designed to work. And also brave and courageous of you to say it all out loud and say, you know what? Not every decision I made was the right decision. Not everything I tried worked out. That makes you a member of the human race, and that's an inspiration to everybody you talk to. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hope, and thank you, Eric. We had a Gugu had her hand up. I see you've lowered it. Do you still have a question, Gugu?
It wasn't necessarily a question, it was a takeout, Sim, just to appreciate that the way in which Eric explained I think the first box about failure and how it's something that has been taught over the years, the way in which the system would ingrain these ideas in our heads, and then we end up feeling that after school. So in the event that you do fail in school, you are rejected or you're treated as a second-hand, I want to say citizen or second-hand student, you know, and it's something that we carry with as we do life, as we grow up and we become adults and we do businesses or we do our careers. It's something that we become ashamed of. And this for me is some form of liberation for us to be aware, to be conscious of these systems, I mean, of these things that have been instilled within our minds, and take the conscious decision to unlearn them such that we become free at the end of the day, we become liberated, and we're not chained by the way in which the system has always detected that this is the normal way of failing. For us to be free in failing, for us to be free in being authentic and just take risks and just, yeah. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
That was very well put. Yes, thank you for sharing your thought. And it really, you know, we mentioned it quickly. I'm glad you picked up on it. And we're going to talk about this. I was going to talk about this more later, but I'll talk about it more now. The way that the system has been designed our whole lives is really hard to overcome. But what we have learned in just the 1,000 entrepreneurs that we have worked with in the Center for Entrepreneurship is that we have learned that the people who tend to be entrepreneurial, the most common type of person that we see are the people who don't get perfect grades in school, right? Because the people who get perfect grades in school, they live in a world that was designed precisely for them. They knew how the system worked. They studied. They got good grades. The system is gonna design for them to go right into a job and into an opportunity and be successful, and that's all fine. They will be the type of person that gets handed a job description, and they'll look at the job description. They'll say, "I can do that," and just like they have done throughout their entire college or schooling, they will say, "I know how to do this. Give me an assignment. I will get an A," and they'll get a performance review once a year, and they'll get a 5% raise, and they'll go through 30 years of that, and then they'll retire and do whatever they want to do next. To some people, that's boring, right? To entrepreneurs, that's boring. What's more interesting is that the people who tend to be good entrepreneurs or innovators in general are the people who didn't get perfect grades. They didn't live in a world that was designed perfectly for them. So they figured out how to find their own way, to carve their own path. And those people build a grit in the way they approach life that's unique to them. So ironically, that system that you just described that teaches you that failure is bad and that you need to follow the rules, that works for some people. The people that doesn't work for doesn't make them failures. It sets them up to be wildly successful in the rest of their life because they've learned to color outside the lines. By coloring outside the lines, you are more authentically you. You are bringing who you are to the world and not fitting in a box. Those people tend to be innovators. They tend to be able to create and build new products and new services. They tend to be super successful entrepreneurs. It oversimplifies things, but people say that people who get B grades, like ABC, people who get B grades work for people who get C grades. And people who get A grades teach. And I think that's really interesting because the people who get C grades, they come through and there's a period of time in their life where they feel like they're at the bottom of the barrel. But you know what? They're scrappy and they're creative and they're driven and they are their own person. And those people tend to be more successful over time. So the system that is designed to educate us is not doing us any favors. It's building in a lot of these fears. It's where a lot of it comes from. And it's why it's so common, because we all go through school. We all face those same expectations. And at a very, very young age, it forms in our minds what our expectations are for ourselves and what we perceive the world's expectations are of us. And we really need to overcome that because that is a barrier. It's a constraint on living our own lives that is unnecessary and unhelpful. Any other thoughts before we move to the next section? I have to keep an eye on time. I don't want to lose track of time.
This slide for me is gold.
Good.
It's just, yeah, I feel like I had been waiting for this one. Never seen this model before, and how you explain the 4 types of fears and how to reframe them. So powerful, and definitely I'm going to be taking this on every time a big fear comes up, because on this journey they do come a lot, but sometimes that process of reframing, sometimes you kind of forget. In fact, at this point I wasn't forgetting, I didn't figure out how to deal with it. It just comes and it's big and it's overloading, but you don't know how to deal with it. And there's tools that you have given here, man. Yeah, I appreciate this one.
Good. Thanks for that feedback, Okay, so let's keep going. There's a couple other points I want to make before we run out of time. But the takeaway from this is that there's power in vulnerability. Now, vulnerability doesn't mean being reckless and putting yourself in dangerous situations. Vulnerability means being authentically you despite the perceived risks. So the fear of being vulnerable, it comes from shame and fear and a struggle for worthiness, right? We feel vulnerable because we feel like that is at risk. And by resisting being vulnerable, we tend to make ourselves numb, or we try to over-perfect things, or we pretend that we're a certain way. All of those things are negative. That's a negative reaction to vulnerability, because we need to recognize that vulnerability, meaning, not being reckless, but being authentically you, that vulnerability is the birthplace of joy and creativity and belonging. It's some of the stuff that we just talked about. And by accepting vulnerability, it's got this double effect. Not only are you not negatively impacted by the fears associated with vulnerability, but it also unleashes you to be seen for who you are, practice gratitude and joy, and believe that you are enough. Vulnerability it gives you a double boost of satisfaction, of joy, of well-being, because you release the negative emotions and you gain so much more at the same time. So if you allow yourself to be vulnerable in facing those fears, you tend to unlock opportunities in your life, in relationships, in business, etc. So I want to leave you with that one last thought on fears. Then we'll talk about the importance of experimentation. And this gets back to what we were just hearing a second ago with the conversation about education and the educational system. If you do anything in the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, whatever, they teach you the scientific method. And so ironically, in the educational system, where they're telling you to get an A and don't fail, they're also teaching you the scientific method. And the scientific method says that I'm going to observe and I'm going to research the world around me. I'm going to form a hypothesis about how things do work or should work. I'm going to test that hypothesis. And then based on the test results, I'm going to draw some conclusions, and I'm going to repeat those experiments until I really feel like I'm an expert and I understand how the world works. We teach that in the educational system that tells you not to fail. What's really important to realize is that the entrepreneurial method is simply the scientific method applied to your life or to your business. We listen and we watch. We propose a solution. We give that solution a try and test it out. We analyze people's reaction, the market's reaction, your company's reaction. And then once you get all that test result, you try it again, see what happens next. In neither of these scenarios do we use the word fail. At no point in time does a negative result on an experiment mean something terrible. It simply means that you are experimenting and you are learning what works. And the more experiments you do, the quicker you learn what works. We have to get rid of the way the educational system works and embrace what the educational system teaches about the scientific method and apply that to the way they work. And extend yourself the grace to try without fear. We do that in science. We do that for each other. We do that for our children. We have to do that for ourselves. So the last topic I'm going to cover before we move over entirely to some Q&A is the idea of control. Because there are some things, we talk about setting goals and having intrinsic motivation and facing our fears. And at the end of the day, though, there are some things we cannot control. And as entrepreneurs or as business owners or business professionals, we've got to really understand this concept. And what it means is that you've got this gigantic world out there, much of which you cannot control. So it's really super important to understand that there is this little bit of space that you can control. For you to spend any of your time beating your head against the wall and worrying and throwing your energy or your time or your money at scenarios that you cannot control, you are wasting your time. You are wasting your energy. You've got to take a good hard look at the world in which you live and focus on the things that you can control. So what that means, if you're the type of person that has an external locus of control, it means that you're driven and motivated by the external forces that you cannot control. If you have an internal locus of control, it means that you are clear about what you can do and what is in your power, and knowing the difference between those two. If you have an external locus of control, you tend to think in terms of, well, that's just fate. Or something goes wrong, I have to find someone to blame. If things go right, it's just luck. And you tend to think of the things that you do as, I have to do this. That's somebody that's influenced and driven by what's happening to them. If you have an internal locus of control, you have taken a good peek at the landscape in which you're operating and said, there are some things here I can do. And I'm going to focus on the things that I can do. And so the person that has an internal locus of control says, hard work makes all the difference. The right attitude makes all the difference. And I'm going to plan to use my resources, my time, my relationships, my money. I'm going to plan to use those in areas where I can affect the outcome. And the stuff that I can't affect the outcome for, I'm not going to take the burden of worrying about that because I can't do anything about it. You can be aware of it and you should know about it, and you should recognize the fact that there are forces that are beyond your control, many of which may impact your company. Being aware is different than worrying about it or throwing perfectly good resources at problems that you cannot fix. If you live in that world, then you choose to do things. You don't have to do things. It's the difference between responding to a situation or reacting to it, spending your time or investing your time. Those make a gigantic difference. And again, we're talking about mindset. So it's about reframing in your own head. The world is exactly the same as it's going to be, no matter how you think about it. So think about it in a way that's productive for you. Think about it by segmenting out the things that you can affect, spending your time there, investing your time there, and then not allowing the things you cannot control to bring you down. Be aware of them. Don't let them control you. Knowing the difference between these two things is super, super important. So this is the summary of what we talked about today. And I was told to talk till quarter of, and then we can do some more Q&A. So to summarize the last hour and 45 minutes, be clear about your vision. It's the most important component of this entire process. If you do not know where you're going, all the actions in the world don't matter because you could just be spinning around in circles. Find your intrinsic motivation. Figure out what is it that motivates you to move forward. That comes from your vision. Achieving your compelling goals, not the compelling goals of somebody else who needs your help. You can by all means be helpful as much as you want, but not at the expense of what you're trying to do with your own life. Overcome inertia with those compelling goals. That's how you get started, because sometimes goals can be super, super broad. Drive traffic to the website was our example. You overcome inertia with goals that you can see how they connect to getting the life you want or achieving the vision you want. And then you get right down to the SMART objectives that tell you exactly what the next step needs to be. Sometimes if the steps are too large or they're too vague, you don't tend to take the steps because you lack the motivation to get up off the couch because you don't necessarily see the impact right away. So it's easy not to get started. But if you plan a SMART objective and you know down to, I know what has to get done this week in order to accomplish the goal that I have set for next year, knowing what to do this week is enough to get you up and going, because next week you got another goal or another SMART objective to achieve. Getting this one done is the first step to getting the next one done. And if you can discipline yourself to doing those one after the next, then you wake up one day, you've achieved all your goals, you've achieved your vision, and you say, wow, that was much, much easier than I thought, because I took it one step at a time. It's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. And then we got to reframe our fears. We talked about that at length. You guys get that one. But again, nothing changes in the world except how you perceive it. And that makes a gigantic difference. Reframing that in your own mind makes all the difference in the world. And allow yourself to be vulnerable. Recognize the fact that you're a member of the human race. And to the extent that you make mistakes, you try things that don't work, you have successes, you have setbacks, all of that is normal. All of your fears are normal. And to the extent you can just admit that to yourself and admit that to the people who are around you, who love you and support you, it makes them more comfortable in their own skin because they can see that it's okay to be authentic. And then the last thing is control what you can and let the rest go. Do not beat yourself up trying to change the world in ways that you are not empowered to do so. Recognize where you can have impact. Focus your attention there, and don't spend time worrying about stuff that's not going to make any difference, or that you can't affect in the long term. So I will leave you with this quote: never mistake activity for achievement. If you don't have a vision and you don't follow this process and you keep yourself busy, that's not enough. Don't be satisfied with keeping busy. Achieve something and decide what that's going to be and plan accordingly. And it'll pay dividends, not in the short term, or not only in the short term, but for the rest of your life. And when you reflect back to a life that has no regrets, you'll be so happy that you adjusted your mindset just a little bit in 2021, and it bent the curve of the rest of your life and made it something meaningful and purposeful and satisfying. So we have a few minutes left. Please let me know what questions you have, and I'll stop sharing the screen, and that way I can see more faces.
Sure. Thank you very much, Eric. That was indeed so informative and definitely a good hour and 45 minutes well invested. I'd just like to open up. If anyone has any questions, please do feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have.
I'm sorry that I might have missed some questions in the chat as we came along. It's hard to look at the chat and look at the screen share at the same time. So if you put it in the chat and we haven't addressed it, please bring it back up. I'm happy to talk more about it.
Okay, I'm also going to just double check if there is anything that we missed during the presentation. It looks like we're on track. From my side, I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity. I also have some questions, just as you are presenting, and I think more than anything, it's the reframing of the mind that's been critical for me. Sometimes the journey of stepping out of employment to becoming an entrepreneur, it's all these fears that come to play. But the question, Eric, that I have is regarding, so there was a graph almost that you shared, if I'm not mistaken. I tried to draw it on my own, which speaks about challenge, and then the x-axis was skill. And there's the optimal performance line in terms of the compelling goals. So moving from the place of anxiety, because there are times where there's opportunities that are opened to you. So the challenge is right there, but there is, and I suppose it's the whole inadequacy thing, where because you don't feel ready, or you've never seen what you do as, actually, this could make lots of money for me. The transforming of the mindset towards, now it's not even a fear of failure or of what will people say, but it's the internal, I don't know how to put it, but being unsure of, do they really find the value in what I have so much so that they would pay? So
Oh.
10,000 20 times, because you feeling like, if I say 10,000, is it really 10,000? So the anxiety, you've got the skill, but now the anxiety is putting value towards what you have to offer. I don't know if my question is clear, but I'm stuck between those two lines where the challenge, I've never known it was worth money. I've now learned that actually you've invested in the research, you've invested in yourself to this point. Now people are looking for you, but now you're like, I don't know how much it is or how much is the value of what I'm bringing forward.
So I am wrestling with sort of how to answer your question. Are you trying to, are you saying that challenges are kind of too vague to figure out how to deal with? Or if you can ask the question a different way, it would be helpful.
It's you've identified, so the skill you've built up, right? And you are at a place where you become anxious when you need to quantify how much people would pay you for what you offer. So the session that you've just given us, you've done the work, you've done everything, and I ask you, how much was it? But you've always done this out of passion, or maybe even in your professional capacity, there's a salary associated with it. And now you're at a place where you're ready to transition and make this something that earns you personal revenue.
Yeah.
Getting to the confidence of actually the hour and 45 minutes that you've just spent with us, it's worth $1,000, $2,000, $100. Yeah, getting to that confidence.
Yeah, well, I get that. And so anybody who, Uno is a great example of this, right? Somebody who says, I've got this skill and I'm going to go out and figure out how to take what I'm good at and figure out in the marketplace how to bring that value to the marketplace. And then it's your right to bring that value and then get compensated in a way that allows you to earn a living. And finding out where that value is important. The trick is to figure out how to define that value. So value can be described as you want to make $20 an hour and I'm going to invest 10 hours. So therefore it's worth $200, right? That's sort of cost-based pricing. The value-based pricing says, what is the value of what I'm delivering to the people I'm delivering it to? What is it going to enable them to do? What kind of potential is it going to unlock? What kind of productivity are they going to gain? What is the insight that I'm offering going to be able to do for them? And what is that worth? That's a whole different ballgame, because you have to think about your own skills and passions and talents and experience as having intangible value that you cannot break that down into an hourly wage. It's unfair to you to do that because it comes from a lifetime of experience. So to count it in the hour that you're delivering it diminishes the work it took you to get to that point. So value-based pricing is important. Now, how do you figure out what that value is? We're big fans of low-cost, low-risk experiments. You don't take your pricing and throw it up on your website and announce it to 10,000 people, because then you're stuck. It's a lot harder to raise prices after you have declared your pricing. But I think I would get a client, one client who you think is your ideal customer, who you think is uniquely positioned to value what you bring, and engage with that one person and say, here is the value that I think I bring by giving you my expertise. Do you agree with that or not? Do you want to do business with me or not? And if they say, no, it's not worth that, one of two things is true. They either are not a good example of your ideal customer, or your pricing is too high. And you learned which one that is by trying again. And then you try again, and you try again, you get 3 or 4 examples, and suddenly a pattern develops. And now you understand what the value is for that particular type of customer. And that will allow you to decide how to market your services, because you know the person that values it the most, and you know exactly how to talk to that person because you just did. And you know how to price the solution with confidence. Now, the other thing you have to recognize is that your job is not to offer your talents to the entire world. You don't have to price it so that the entire world can afford it. You have to price it so that your target market values it and can afford it. And 99% of the world's population could say that price is too high and I would never pay it. But if 1% of the world would pay it, you can't even support more than 1% of the world anyway. So why set your pricing so that everybody can afford it? You've got to work those kind of balances, and it comes with time. You're not going to know that immediately. You've got to practice. You've got to try. You've got to experiment. And then over time, you will have a pricing strategy that you can be confident in. And some people will not afford it, and that's okay.
Thank you very much, Eric. I know we are out of time. We just have a comment from Wandile, and then that will be a wrap up, where he has said it was a really insightful session. I have been greatly impacted by this mini workshop. I particularly love the fact that your talk was sort of dualistic, bringing both academic facet as well as real world side to communicate your message. I think that's it. We can add about 2 questions before we go into the next session, if anyone has any questions, but I thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Okay, I'll hand over to Uno for his final remarks. Thank you very much, Eric.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the time. It was great to see everybody, and I appreciate the feedback and the questions and the conversation. I wish you all the best.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming through. And just hang on, this is not right. Let me use this one. Thank you so much for coming through. And I kept remembering the day that I received an email from Mallory saying that this is going to be your, I don't know what they called it, but all in all, it was saying this is going to be your guide through the Mandela Washington Fellowship. Whatever you need, talk to this guy. And I see this profile and I'm like, how did these guys come up with such a guy for guiding me? This is exciting. And when we started talking and we went through this fellowship, I looked forward to every hour we spent with you and Danielle. And to get the opportunity to share that with my community of friends, my community of clients, and my community of people that just want to develop themselves is a dream come true. And so thank you so much for sharing what you share. And what I love about what you share is that it's so practical. It is, you feel like now you have the permission to go and do your entrepreneurial dreams and to go and live them right. And I wish we had more time. And like you said, at some point, we're going to do it live. And we're going to do it right here on the African continent, and you're going to be there.
I'll be there. Thank you, and I appreciate it. I really enjoyed our sessions as well when you were here in the US, and I look forward to doing it again. Thank you for having me.